Hey everyone, this is Andre Matoyer, and welcome to another episode of the Bear Share Show. Today I am joined by the funny, awesome, amazing Stevie Larsen. How are you today, Stevie?
Doing pretty good. Can't complain.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Podcasts are fun, so
They
I'm
are.
happy to be here.
Thanks, man. So I wanted to bring you on today because I wanted to talk about something that I think is a huge part of the LGBTQ community, and I know a huge part of the bear community as well. And I think people after this podcast today may realize that they themselves, even though they might not think traditionally, may also be gamers. And so this is sort of the whole premise behind today's conversation. And also, since I have Steven here, maybe we can get a little bit more insight into what it's like being in the video game industry. So, that being said, I wanted to have you come on. And first, why don't you talk to us a little bit about your first experience with video games? Because I know that you are now in video games professionally. So, when it comes to video games, what was your first experience with video games and playing them for the very first time?
So, very first gaming experience ever. I remember I was over at my aunt's house, and they said, "Oh, yeah, there's a video game downstairs if you want to play it." Because I was kind of bored and all the adults were doing stuff, and I can't remember how old I was. I think it was probably like maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I just remember going downstairs and seeing this gold cartridge, and I was just like, "What is this?" And I plugged it in, and it was a Legend of Zelda. So, and I was just remember listening to music, and I was just like, "What is this game?" And then, taking the sword and then like shooting out like these little lightning swords. I was like, "Oh, this is the coolest thing ever!" And
What was your first gaming console?
the first system we had ever was a Super Nintendo.
Mine too.
We bought that from my uncle, yeah. And I think ever since then, when we've always just been. I kind of grew up always Nintendo people,
Yeah.
Like Nintendo was just always my favorite. I
Well,
love the characters and
especially in the
whatnot.
90s, that was like, everyone had a Nintendo. It was like
Oh yeah.
Nintendo, Super Nintendo, 64. My first system was also the Super Nintendo.
Hmm.
Super Mario is probably still one of my favorite games ever because it's my first game that I ever played, and I just thought it was great. The graphics still hold up. I mean, it's a great 2D looking game. It's
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of fun. I still sometimes play it on an emulator.
Oh yeah.
It's fantastic. But those are the kind of memories that we grew up with. Having those systems and having those experiences at a younger age.
Yeah. I mean, like I remember growing up in Maryland, back east. I remember when we got when the Nintendo 64 came out, and playing with my friends and playing Super Smash Brothers, and and like how that was just the cherry on top, when it came to like really developing these awesome friendships with my best
Yeah.
friends. And being able to like the couch gaming, and with it having four controllers, four
Yep.
people playing games at
Mario
once,
Kart
it's
64. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Video games were a great way as a kid to make friends. If you had the latest console, everyone was coming over to your house. Your parents were going to order some pizza, and then, that was like your Friday night when you were like a young kid. You know what I mean? Everyone would come over. Like you said, Smash Bros, Mario 64, GoldenEye. That was another one that was really big back in the Nintendo
Oh
days.
yeah.
Um, but even like if you had a Sega Genesis, people would come over and play Mortal Kombat or Lion King or Aladdin or something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was times even like when one person would be playing Star
Mm,
Fox, and we would just be watching,
yeah.
and we would take turns, and that was just as much, and that was still because sometimes we get tired, or
Yeah.
sometimes like we go and play outside and then come back
Yep.
in, and
Yep.
yeah, no, but no, like I mean, play was a huge part of my life growing up, and I think me as a gay man, I think that play is kind of a release. Like there's something authentic about play.
I call it like escapism. get your mind off of stuff.
I mean, there's like two kinds of escapism. There's the escapism where you're trying to run away from something, and then there's the
Hmm.
escapism where you're escaping to be empowered. You know what I
Sure.
mean?
Yeah.
And you hopefully take that back with you when you're done escaping. And I think that play gives us an opportunity to be empowered like
Yeah.
that.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that video games have been a huge impact on both of us since we were kids and growing up, and now even as adults. And I mentioned earlier that you do video games professionally. So what made you sort of want to take that leap from playing games to wanting to be in the video game industry?
I was in college for a while trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew that I served an LDS mission, and after my LDS mission,
Ooh, you're a Mormon, huh?
yeah, after my mission, I was looking at I was actually looking at BYU,
Mhm.
and I would wanted to go into animation. I thought like, oh man, it'd be so cool to work at Pixar because Pixar is a great place to work.
DreamWorks, any of those things? Yeah.
Yeah, um, and then once I got into my program. We had the opportunity to work on either the video game or the movie or our little short or animated short.
Okay.
And once I got a taste for game development, because at this time it actually coincided with me actually playing more games because I remember my teacher being like, "Hey, if you're not playing video games, you need to be because that's an integral part of research
Wow.
and of our
I would love
career."
that homework assignment. That's amazing.
Right? Yeah, so I started and I before that point I hadn't really played many of the indie games that people were talking about, and like I remember just like people always talking about Journey and that being a big
Yeah.
influence for their game
So this
career.
is like the
And
PS3 360 era.
it's about the time that I really got into my animation
Okay.
program,
Yeah, that
2012.
was the end of the PS3.
The end of the PS3, beginning of the PlayStation 4 era, and there's all these games that I hadn't played before that people were talking about. It's like, okay, so I got to try these games out. And once I got into into the indie scene and seeing what independent game developers are doing, I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. Like they're doing stuff like they're playing around with game design in a way that I hadn't really experienced until that point, where they're telling the story through the actions that you take as a character. This is the first time I played Portal and Portal
Hmm.
2. The first time I was playing a lot of these games that are really pushing what it means to tell that narrative. And then, once I was a senior, I started playing The Last of Us, and
Oh yeah,
that blew my mind as well.
Mass Effect. Actually,
Yeah,
next month they're
yeah.
doing the re-release or the remaster. I'm so excited. Those games were phenomenal storytelling. Super interesting.
See, and Mass Effect is another one of those that I didn't get around to.
Oh,
So now that now
please
that I know
do
there's a
it, and
remaster
we'll talk about
release,
it.
I gotta get. Yeah, absolutely. I gotta
Please do.
gotta get to
Yeah,
it.
please do. So you ended up, falling in love with video games, not just playing them, but also like you wanted to create them. So what do you do officially now?
So worked as a UI designer for a software company, and then I worked as a contractor doing UX design. Um, so I've done. I was working in software development, and But the thing was, I just knew where my passion was, my love was. So I moved out to California, and I'm still trying to make do with my career, but I was like, okay, I got to find a good stepping stone to help grow my career, eventually get into games, but something that's fulfilling. And I discovered a job where I could teach animation and 3D software and principles to uh, adults on the autism spectrum.
That is awesome. That's absolutely amazing, and I'm sure very, very rewarding. That's super cool.
Yeah, it's super awesome. It's a great job, a great company to work for, and I feel just privileged to work with these human beings, on the autism spectrum. It's just I feel like I learn something from them every day, and it's just super cool to see how they
Yeah,
grow and inspiring. So
that's awesome. Yeah. and they want to be there, like they're trying, and that's exciting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you meet one person with autism, you've met exactly one person with autism.
Ah,
It's a
okay.
spectrum. There's all sorts of there's all sorts of stuff. And so I don't like talking about
Okay, that's
generalities.
fair.
I this is one generality I will say is that typically with a lot of my students and people I've met that are on the autism spectrum, they are just the most genuine people you'll ever meet. And that is completely refreshing.
Steven, dude, that's such a cool job. Like, I'm sure your students are super fortunate and lucky to have such an amazing teacher. Be patient and be there for them. So I think that's great. Kudos to you. That being said, I'm curious just kind of to know more about your perspective and a little bit about how you got into the video game industry. I know it's may seem like an easy industry to get into, but it's not. So share with me your experience with getting into it.
So, getting into the games industry, it's hilarious. Like it's hilarious to me when I look at it uh, objectively because typically there's a lot of crunch in games, long hours. It's very exhausting. The pay can sometimes be good,
Okay.
but sometimes isn't great. Like unless you own the company and you're one of the bigwigs and you're executive, then hey, games makes a ton of money.
Gotcha.
Um, and so it's like funny because it's definitely a job that you get into because you love it and you can't imagine doing anything else. Which is exactly why I'm trying to get into games. Actually, it's why I moved out to Los Angeles. I I moved out here because a lot of the companies I've been interested in working for are located here. There's Blizzard, there's Riot, there's Santa Monica Game Studio.
Mm.
Back at my decision, I was like, this is a great place for me to grow my career.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's obvious to me that video games have had a really big impact on you, and me and you are both about the same age, right? I'm 33. You're yeah,
yeah, 34
exactly, yeah.
here.
So we both grew up with video games. I know that if you were to ask our parents at when they were in their 30s, someone who played video games probably might get looked down upon. Like, what are you doing? Why are you acting like a kid? And to their credit, video games were often advertised to kids. You know what I mean? They pick games like Ninja Turtles or stuff that was popular for kids at that time.
Even though Mortal Kombat was
Exactly.
made at that time, and
Well, Mortal Kombat's why we have ratings on games. Like that was the
oh
whole
yeah.
reason why we have M for mature and T for teen, all that stuff. So like obviously that wasn't the case back then, but that was still the stigma. What I've noticed now though is that because we've grown up with them, like we don't see it that way. Plus, the technology's gotten better. So, do you think that it's just for kids?
Absolutely
Okay.
not. When it comes to games, I think games are inclusive
Yeah.
and that really they're for everyone. Uh, games, just as play is for everyone. I mean, if you look at the language, at other languages and look at the history of the word play and just the idea of play, which is where games come from. I mean, it's also where sports comes from, but for other there is obviously a distinction of play with children and children's games versus what adults play in
Yeah.
sports and competitions and contests. But at its fundamental form, play is for everyone,
Absolutely.
and uh, video games is far too big to be is video games are is far too expansive and big to just be for kids.
Oh, totally. It's one of the most
You
like
know,
largest, I think, entertainment industries, if not the largest, I believe.
absolutely. Oh no,
Yeah, right. It's
but
like
yeah, the video game industry it makes more than music and television and film
that's
combined.
nuts.
You take all those industries combined, and they still don't make as much
Yeah,
money as video
yeah.
games do.
That's just nuts. I mean, and that just tells you how popular it is. Video games in general. So, I also think the term gamer needs to be changed from that stigma because games are just more like ubiquitous. You can find them everywhere. So like,
Hmm.
you know, before we used to have to buy a Super Nintendo to only play games on the Super Nintendo or the Sega. But now I can just go on my phone and download, you know, Candy Crush if anyone still plays that or whatever. And technically,
Right.
even though I'm sitting at, you know, the checkout line just waiting to kill some time at the grocery store, I can play a round of Candy Crush. That technically makes me a gamer. You know, the same thing with
Absolutely.
the mom with their kids, you know, just sitting there. Like if she wants to play, you know, Candy Crush in the wherever she's at, the car wash, that makes her technically a gamer. I think people just don't see it that way because it's like, oh, that's not like a hardcore game. That's just a casual thing. Well, no, it's still a video game. It's a screen.
Yeah, that's absolutely
Yeah.
correct. I tell that to my friends that say, "Oh, I'm not a gamer." I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
do you play games on your cell phone? It's like, "Oh yeah,
Yep.
obviously." And it's like, "Well, that makes you a
It
gamer."
does.
And and then there's the gatekeeping of like the hardcore gamers that that play Call of Duty or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of want to hold on to that title, and it's like, well, guys, you're still gamers, but so is the mom that's playing Candy Crush,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
They don't think of it that way, but it's very real.
it's you're a different quality of gamer, and that's
Yeah.
okay. It's there's nothing like your space is not going to be invaded upon by a bunch of soccer moms just because you like Call of Duty. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just because she's a gamer too. I tell my friends, I tell them, you are a gamer. You just have to find the right. You just haven't found the right game yet. You know.
Yes, and the reason is because to me, games are pretty much like any other art form. Like I was telling this to a friend of mine that I hung out with recently, who's not a video gamer, and I'm like, that's cool, but I look at it as the same thing as a good movie, a good book. It's it's a good piece of entertainment that if it captures your attention and if you're invested, it can provide that really good moment and that good experience, just like a good book could be or a good movie could provide, same sort of thing. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, it's just another art form like anything else,
Absolutely.
and it's one of the most popular ones. And like you can even compare video games to like sports, even though I know a lot of people don't like that because they're like, oh, sports are physical and games are just sitting there. But like, there's that entire whole esports industry, and that is like insane. That whole thing is huge.
Oh yeah.
Like that shit. Like there's kids or early adults making ridiculous amounts of money playing like what's the big ones like League of Legends, stuff like that, right? Like
Oh yeah, League of Legends,
Fortnite.
Dota,
Oh yeah.
Fortnite, their Rocket League
Oh,
is
Rocket League.
another
I didn't know
one.
that one actually. I
Oh yeah, no, Rocket League has
Wow.
a professional league.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, there's the Overwatch League,
Oh yeah, yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's all sorts of games that are now played
Yeah.
competitively, and that's
Do you think the pandemic has let people maybe push people more into try out gaming?
I think so. I don't know if I've seen it
Sure.
firsthand, but I would definitely think so. I know that the pandemic has introduced a boom for
Mm.
the video games industry. I know. I remember reading that within the first 3 months of the pandemic starting, Nintendo made, I think, 491% in profits.
Oh, well, yeah, you couldn't find a Switch at all, like in the
Oh yeah,
beginning of the
you
pandemic.
couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I bought mine from a friend.
I sold mine to my roommate, and I ended up getting a PS5. Yes, I was lucky. I got one. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, which by the way, those are still hard to find. Same with the new Xbox. Like, so
Oh
I would
yeah.
agree with you. I think people are like, oh, hey, I've been stuck inside. Maybe I found a game that I like. With gaming too, there's a lot of genres. So maybe you aren't into sport games or racing games, but you're super into fighting games or action games or vice versa. Or
Hmm.
I think it's just really good to find the one that maybe hits your spot.
Right. I would encourage people to play games that they're not used to playing.
Oh,
Because especially in the indie scene, it's kind of interesting because we have the Oscars every year that people tune into, and the nice thing about the Oscars is that because it's publicized and everybody watches it, it encourages people to try a movie that they normally wouldn't
Oh,
try.
true. Right.
And we don't quite have that with video games yet, even though we do have the Game Developers Choice Awards and we do have the Game Awards that will highlight these talents of really interesting,
Yeah.
innovative games that are doing something different. Um, there isn't a whole there because it doesn't have that same level of prestige and publicity that the Oscars has. Some of these games don't go played,
Yeah.
or aren't played by your typical gamer that I kind of wish would change, or
Yeah.
even your casual gamers trying out games like The Curse of the Oberdin,
See, I've
Her
never heard of
Story.
that one.
Yeah, no, and both of those games, The Curse of the Oberdin and Her Story, they're these really interesting deductive reasoning games where you're trying to figure out why these mysteries, so to speak.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, super cool stuff. Baba is You is another game that I think is super fascinating. That totally messes with your brain in all the right ways. Uh, so yeah, but eventually, that's something that I wish that I would see more of, is people trying games, like treating games like how they treat movies. Like, what, I haven't tried this one
Yeah.
before. It got some rewards. Let's
Well,
check
there's
it out.
indie movies, there's indie games, A lot
Yeah,
of those are
exactly.
like word of mouth too. They don't have as high
Yeah,
of like advertising budget, so they kind
yeah,
of stay under the radar. Yeah, it's very similar actually. It's all an entertainment industry. They all have to do the same thing to get people to play their game or watch their movie. It's very very similar. So I think it's really important to bring up the fact that video games bring people together. And that came into play especially over the past year with the pandemic. So, Stevie, I really want to say thank you for. This is how we got to know each other, was through our Overwatch chat and playing that game with our friends
that's right.
in LA. Yeah. So for those that don't know, my roommate is a big PC gamer, which is great, but he played Overwatch back when it came out, like 2016, 17, something like that. And I would watch him play and go, okay, that's cool. But I never would have thought to play that game, which is funny because you were saying try a different game that you might normally not. Well, very recently, like a few months ago, one of the guys gave me an extra copy, and lo and behold, I've been playing with you guys, and it's a lot of fun. I'm like, wow, how come I missed out on this? Like, it's great.
It's a solid
Yeah,
game. It's a game that they've just finely tuned, and it works out great.
but you know, being in the pandemic and not being able to see people, like I haven't really left or gone out since January to do anything. Like
Right.
that was great. Just being able to be like, hey, we're gonna jump on. It's a Thursday, and I'm like, oh hey, I'm bored. Let's do this. That's been
Yeah,
great.
and for me, like I have lived in let's see, right now I live in the Valley in Los Angeles, the San Fernando
Okay.
Valley, and uh, when I moved here, it wasn't too long before the pandemic started, and I've moved around a lot. I know how long it takes me to get settled before I feel like I have a community of friends and a sense of belonging, and it usually takes me about 9 months.
Okay.
Well, the pandemic really hindered that a
I can
lot.
imagine. Yeah.
So I've been looking for friends, and I've been trying to develop more friendships, and so when I saw that a couple of guys in there was this Friday the 13th GTA group,
Yeah.
and I didn't have either of those games, and I was like, okay, but I should try to get one because I need to make more friends,
Hmm.
and that would be really emotionally healthy for
Yeah.
me. Well, then a couple of them started playing Overwatch, and then I was just like, okay, I'm gonna get Overwatch on the PlayStation
Yeah.
4, so that way I can start playing with these guys. And then that's when I created the chat, and then invited a bunch of people. And that the irony is that I created the chat to play Overwatch with friends I still haven't made enough time to play with you guys. I did at
You had
first, but. I know, man. I gotta take. I need to. It's self care. I really need to. I need to put myself out
Yeah.
there so that way I develop these friendships because it's important. But no, Overwatch has been. I mean, it's always been one of my favorite games. I got it when I pre-ordered it when I saw as soon as pre-orders came out. I pre-ordered it when I saw the first trailer for it, which was more like an animated
Yeah.
short. I fell in love. I was like, I don't even know what game this is. I just know I love Blizzard, and
Yeah.
the fact that there's a new intellectual property, so it's a new original
From
idea.
them, which is they're a great company. So, and they've
Yeah,
never done
no,
that before. This type of shooter thing. They're usually more like
right.
over the camera top stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and so I was just, and like, I fell in love with the story. I fell in love with the story that you only really get to experience bits and pieces of in once a year as part of the archives event. But I
Yeah.
fell in love with this world, and the character design was just like, oh man, I don't know what this is, but I love it.
Yeah.
And it just became my
Yeah.
thing. And now I have Overwatch posters on my wall, and Overwatch Funkos,
hmm
and
Well, I hit you up a couple weekends ago because I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on or what any of these characters are. I just play it with you guys. But, it was cool to see like the lore. But that's the whole thing, right? Like these gaming worlds have stories, just like a movie. There's a lot to it. But being this generation of millennials where we've grown up with games, I think look at us now. Like we've been using that as a way to stay connected. Um, there's a lot of people in
absolutely.
that group I still haven't met yet in person. Like I'm looking forward to that happening once the pandemic's over and things are more open. But
You haven't even met me in
I
person
know
yet.
you're one of them for sure. But like, you know, that's something I'm grateful for, and I think that the younger generations are going to be similar to us, like the Gen Z and whatever's after, because they're just going to grow up with it. So that stigma of it being just for kids, I think, is going to go away fairly soon.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too. It's, I mean, you can already see it with how with the video game adaptions,
Oh yeah, the
whether
movies. Yeah.
that's yeah the movies or even like the Netflix shows
Yep.
is like Castlevania or Dota.
What was
Um,
the other one they just did with Superman, Henry Cavill, Witcher?
oh yeah,
Well, I guess those
Witcher.
are books too.
Although the
Yeah.
Witcher Netflix series is basing it more off the
Right.
books,
That's
not
true.
the
Okay.
not the
Mortal
video game.
Kombat
But
just came out this past weekend.
yes, it
Yes,
did.
I'm a
It's
huge Mortal Kombat fan. Like insane. Um, like I play Mortal Kombat at least once a week. And yeah, that came out. It was okay. It was fine.
yeah, I think it was superior to the '90s movie.
Yeah.
Um, like it. I would have like. I think to get everything that you want into a video game adaptation, a series would be better suited for that than a
I
movie.
said the same thing. There's a
Yeah,
lot you could do. Like kind of like yeah, like a series I think works well to tell a good story because there's so much detail going on in video games that you have to
oh
cut
yeah,
stuff or make
I'm
stuff up to like fit and it just doesn't quite work. Versus if you just tell the damn story the way it was written, there's a reason why people like it. Just give yourself 4 more hours to tell it in a series. That's fine.
yeah.
Yeah,
The world. I mean, you spend 40 hours in the world of a video game. On
yeah,
average, oftentimes even more than that. And so you have this enriched world, and how do you try to condense that to a 2-hour
yeah.
movie?
It's hard.
It fits so much better as a series. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the Uncharted one too. But the point is like there's an audience, which tells you how big gaming is because studios wouldn't make these movies. Like, oh, Tomb Raider was a recent one too. I actually like that one. I thought that was fine. Um,
I actually didn't see that one.
it's good. I mean, is it the best thing ever? No, but it's a solid adventure movie and it was well done, I thought. So like there's there's an audience for that, which tells you just how big gaming is. Um, I wanted to ask you. There's a huge LGBTQ following with games. Why do you think that is? Do you think why do you think maybe it impacts LGBTQ people more? Like there's like a huge, you know, gamer community.
Well, I think that, for a lot of um, queer perspectives and queer voices, I think that a gaming community, offers you a safe place to have to really speak to that
Okay.
voice. And like I said before, there's something empowering and safe about it.
Yeah.
I mean, before we could, before before many of us could even entertain the idea of going on a date with someone of the same sex, we could live out those fantasies in The Sims,
Yeah.
you
Or
know,
actually,
and
Mass Effect was the first time that I legitimately could play a gay character. Like the hero
right.
of the story could be a homosexual.
Right. I think that in many ways, it's because of, and then there's something to be said about, games offering that escapism to offer you that safe space from, trauma that you might experience, being an LGBTQI individual, helping you to explore parts yourself, um, and then when playing online with friends, I mean, gay slurs are often used as
That's
insults,
unfortunate.
so
I hate
seeking
that.
it
Yeah.
is in some cases it's automatic and they don't realize it. Like there's XQC, I think is his name. He was a Overwatch League player, and he let out a gay slur
Oh.
once, and he got suspended
Oh,
for
good.
it.
Okay.
um, but he kind of, but and he and and he apologized later and said that it was just something automatic that came out. But he kind of put his money where his mouth was, and he's like, "All right, like I'm gonna do a charity stream, and this is gonna go to a gay charity," and
All
that
right.
was kind of him reconciling for what he said,
That's good. Yeah.
So I don't think that every straight cis gamer out there is necessarily trying to be malicious when they use these gay slurs. They just don't have that understanding of how that it compromises a feeling of safety for someone that's trying to escape
Yeah.
that.
And I don't think
And
maybe they realize how big of an like community in the gaming world LGBTQ people are.
right, I don't think they know that
Yeah.
either. Um, but I think that's also one of the reasons why gay communities are kind of set up that way. I think the other reason why is because, for at least for me personally, I don't drink,
Okay.
and I don't do drugs. I don't and so when it comes to me and gay spaces, I don't it's hard for me to find a gay space that I really enjoy.
Oh,
But one of those spaces is, and where I actually met my ex-boyfriend, was at a gay video game thing.
right on.
And
Okay.
and that's kind of my space. It's a space where I'm just like, oh hey, I'm not really into drinking, I'm not really into all this other stuff, but I love video games, and this is a place where I feel like I can connect,
Yeah.
even though I'm not really a mainstream, even though I have a hard time fitting into the quote unquote
Like the
mainstream.
gay bar scene, which is, yeah,
Right.
that's, it's so hard to, gay dating sucks in general, but then like people meet in bars because that's a place, most people there are gay. And then I love that you were able to find someone outside of that. That's great.
It was still a barcade, but I
Yeah,
but
but
I could do stuff that I could do. I didn't have to
yeah,
drink, you know what I
exactly.
mean? And I don't have to. And I've been to the Eagle, I've been to the Precinct, and I felt comfortable there. I didn't feel like I was weird or anything. I didn't drink, and so I was bored,
Yeah.
and but at the barcade, which is great because it's inclusive. Didn't have to drink. I could just do what I love doing, and then hang out with friends, and that was great. And then a cute guy asked me to hold his beer, and then we hit it off, and then we dated for a great 6 months, and then we had a nice mutual breakup, and we're still friends today. So
6 months is like 8 years in the gay world. I'm just joking.
yeah, it is.
Well, cool. So, what do you see like for gaming in the future? Where do you see that going?
I think VR is going to blossom.
Okay.
Once it really hits strides with the consumer market, VR is definitely going to be the future for gaming and experiences. I think it's going to be I think VR will be really interesting because it will blend kind of in between games and movies. I think there'll be a
Yeah.
lot of experiences in VR where it's just meant to be experienced, and I'm excited for that because I'd love to see what LGBT voices and developers create with that, especially to offer a unique perspective that
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to normally have. When I went to the game developers conference, there was this Chicago developer that wanted to create a VR experience that was uniquely show the perspective of persons of color.
Whoa. I don't even know how you would
And
program that.
well, yeah, no, and so it was kind of cool to put on the headset and to play this young person of color, and to just get to see his life through his eyes in Chicago, and what was like being in a neighborhood, a traditionally black neighborhood, and the tensions of with law enforcement and that type of thing,
Interesting.
and and I think that's really, really great. I think that that VR is going to open up a lot of avenues to really empower minority voices, and and then also just be plain old fun as
Yeah.
well.
I recently played the Oculus Quest 2 for the first time.
Yeah,
Absolutely blown away. Like, I was expecting it to be okay. It was phenomenal. In fact, I think, kind of like cell phones, I think that's going to turn people into gamers, that don't normally consider themselves one either. That thing is
yeah,
awesome. Like, my sister tried it too, and I think that we are going to buy it for our parents because I know that they'll love it. And they're
oh
not
yeah,
big video gamers, but like I think they would absolutely lose their shit over it. So,
yeah.
and that's VR, and I think you're 100% right. I think that's definitely going to be the future. I hope it is. It's so cool.
It's super cool. Like, and we're just at the beginnings of that
Which
technology.
is
So
crazy because it's already a lot
yeah,
better than I thought it was going to be. So
yeah.
it's nuts. Um, well, thank you so much, Stevie, for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate your perspective on the video game world as someone who's in it, who teaches people with autism. I think that's great. And hopefully you get to use that as a stepping stone to your next big position and get to make the next cool game, maybe the next cool VR game, which would be pretty awesome.
That would be pretty
It would.
awesome. But thanks for having me on the show, Andre. I had a great time
Yeah.
and love talking about games, and it was a good
Yeah.
time.
Well, so I think the point is today is that video games are for everyone and everyone is a gamer.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. Well, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for listening. And thanks for listening to another episode of The Bear Share Show. If you're interested in ever being a guest on The Bear Share Show, please feel free to email me at thebearshareshow@gmail.com. And then also feel free to follow and subscribe to the show on YouTube. And I'm available to listen to on both Spotify and Apple Music and Facebook as well. So thank you so much. And I hope all of you have a great night. Thank you again so much, Stevie.
No problem. Have a good night,
Bye.
everyone.